Michael, thank you for joining us on TV Rain. Thank you for finding the time. First of all, what do you think of the proposals that are now coming from all sides to sit Ukraine and Russia down at the negotiation table? Is it possible at this moment in time?
You asked me an analytic question, not a normative question. Is it possible? And my answer to that is I don't see it being possible. It's easy to say we should bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. But then you have to ask the concrete question, how? Как? How are you going to convince Putin to negotiate? I watch Putin very closely. I listen to his words very closely. I've known Putin since 1991. I worked with him in the government for 5 years. I know his circle around him well. I know Mr. Patrushev. I know Mr. Bartnikov. These are people I used to work with. I have seen no signs whatsoever that Mr. Putin wants to talk. So if you're going to propose that there should be negotiations, you have to spell out very concretely how you will convince or coerce Mr. Putin to negotiate. Otherwise, it's just talk.
If we go off the fact that the counteroffensive is currently in progress, and it seems like it has now indeed begun, then everything depends on the success of the Ukrainian armed forces. Do you think that they could win?
Do I hope Ukraine wins? Yes. Do I think they could win? Yes. Am I a general or a military specialist? No. Do I talk to former generals all the time who I think are much more qualified than me? I do all the time. And when you listen to them, they feel quite confident that this counteroffensive will be successful. But I would add two things to that commentary. First, it's not going to be something that we measure in hours or days or weeks. I think everybody needs to understand this we will measure in weeks and months. Look at other wars. They don't break through in terms of a few days. And I think there's been too much commentary so far saying, oh, the counteroffensive hasn't worked because we haven't seen breakthrough. Number two, everybody talks about the counteroffensive. I think that's incorrect. I think people need to begin to remind themselves that there could be many counteroffensives, that there could be another one in the fall. There could be another one a year from now, especially as the Ukrainian armed forces are waiting to receive new military equipment from the West. I have every reason to believe that this is the first counteroffensive, but this will not be the last counteroffensive.
What is your view on the future of the Russian Federation? The country that you used to love, the country that has now completely blocked you off and essentially in an official capacity forbidding you from entering, the country that you know and understand. What is the perspective from the Russian side?
Well, this is a very sad time for those of us who have lived. I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm that old, Katya. I lived in Russia for many, many years. I have many close friends in Russia. I have great respect for Russian history and culture and great respect for some Russian individuals. For me, this is the darkest time that I can remember. Far worse, by the way, than the end of the Cold War, when we were cooperating more with the Soviet Union. And I mean, even before Gorbachev. Having said that, I'm an optimist in the long run for two reasons. One, as a professor of political science who studies modernization, democratization, revolution, I think it's important to point out that Russia today is one of the most economically developed countries in the world, one of the most educated countries in the world that is still a dictatorship. If you look over the course of hundreds of years, when people become more wealthy, more educated, more urban, they tend to become democratic countries. The 20 most richest countries in the world, GDP per capita, 19 of them are democracies. That's not an accident. And so I think the idea that Russia's special, Russia's different, Russia will always be a dictatorship, that's what people used to write about Germany 100 years ago, Japan 100 years ago. Even just 40 years ago, you should know that there was many theories that Catholic countries would always be autocratic because the majority of Catholic countries in Southern Europe and Latin America were run by dictatorships. All of those theories look really silly now. So in the long run, I think there's a possibility for change in the Russian Federation, but not while Mr. Putin is in power. I see no possibility whatsoever for that. I think there needs to be a defeat of Russian imperialism in order to have the opportunity years or decades from now for a renewal of Russian society, a renewal of political institutions inside Russia.
Finally, I wanted to ask you about the fact that combat has now moved onto the territory of the Russian Federation. This isn't necessarily surprising, but nevertheless, does this disturb you, considering that the US was categorically against this scenario playing out?
Well, again, I'm not a military expert, but I am somebody who studied history for most of my life. There are very rarely wars that one side gets to attack the other, and then the side being attacked is not allowed to attack those that attack them. This is war. I'm not surprised by anything. I understand the Biden administration's position that they do not want to give Ukraine the means to attack Russia. I disagree with that argument, but I understand it and I respect it. I think it's important to point out, to the best of my knowledge, that when we look at who is fighting in Belgorod, those are Russians fighting Russians. Those aren't Ukrainians invading Russia. And I don't know who supports them. I don't know under what jurisdiction and authority they're doing what they're doing, but nobody should be surprised, whether it's Nord Stream 2 or Crimea or what's happening with these groups in Belgorod, that if you invade a country, you should expect that there will be responses to that. And the idea that Ukraine somehow is not legally allowed to attack Russian forces wherever they deem to do so, there's no war in history that I can think of that those were the terms of the engagement. Maybe Mr. Putin should have thought about that before he, in an unprovoked way and in a barbaric way, invaded Ukraine. Maybe Russians, who were so excited about this horrible, horrific war, should have thought about that before they praised it. Is this advancing the security interests of Russia? The answer, I think, is unequivocally no. Russian armed forces are weaker today than a year and a half ago. The Russian economy is weaker today than a year and a half ago. Russia is isolated today much more than a year and a half ago. Leaders are supposed to defend and secure their citizens. Putin's war is not doing that for Russian citizens.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hope to see you again soon. That was Michael McFaul, former United States ambassador to Russia.
TV Rain has started broadcasting in English so that you could get news about Russia, the war in Ukraine, and Russian society directly from the source.
Russia's military is unable to stop Ukrainian forces.
The Kremlin's newest propaganda target is now the LGBT community.
TV Rain channel has been shut down in Russia many times. The last one happened at the beginning of March, when the war started.
Мы временно приостанавливаем работу телеканала.
We survived, started working from Europe, and now we are watched by millions of people every day, for whom we are the only TV station that tells the truth about the war. Subscribe to our English channel TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube.